They said she was the most mysterious woman of the ancient world, a queen whose wealth rivaled empires, whose intelligence intimidated kings, and whose journey across burning deserts would echo through history long after her name faded into legend. But the real question has never been whether the Queen of Sheba existed. The real question is this: why did she truly travel to Jerusalem? Because powerful rulers do not cross thousands of miles out of curiosity alone. They move when something threatens their position, challenges their understanding, or promises knowledge that could redefine their future. And what she heard about Solomon was not merely that he was wealthy, not merely that he commanded armies or controlled trade routes. She heard that his wisdom was connected to the name of the Lord. That detail changes everything. This was not political gossip. This was spiritual reputation. It meant that Solomon was known not only for strategy, but for divine insight. And for a queen who ruled one of the most economically strategic kingdoms of her era, that kind of report could not be ignored. Sheba was not a minor territory lost in the sands of Arabia or Africa. It controlled the incense routes, the trade of myrrh and rare spices, commodities so valuable that entire alliances depended on them. Caravans from distant lands passed through its influence. Wealth flowed like rivers through its markets, and at the center of that power stood a woman. In a world where kings dominated chronicles and inscriptions, a queen ruling independently was already extraordinary. That alone suggests strength, intelligence, and political mastery. She did not inherit a quiet throne. She maintained influence in a region filled with competing powers, which means that when she heard about Solomon, she did not hear as a naive admirer. She listened as a strategist. The text says she came to test him with hard questions. That phrase is explosive. She did not come to congratulate him. She did not come to submit. She came to evaluate. Imagine the scale of that journey, a caravan loaded with gold in massive quantities, precious stones, spices in abundance beyond anything Jerusalem had seen. Camels stretching across the horizon like a moving wall of wealth. This was not a casual visit. It was a declaration. It announced power before she even entered the gates of the city. Jerusalem had likely hosted ambassadors before, but none with such dramatic presence. And when she stood before Solomon, she did something few rulers dared to do. She spoke of everything that was in her heart. That line opens a deeper layer of the story. Everything in her heart. That suggests more than political inquiry. It implies philosophical questioning, existential doubt, perhaps even spiritual unrest. What does a queen who possesses wealth beyond measure still lack? Why would someone at the height of power travel across deserts unless something inside remained unsettled? And Solomon answered all her questions. The text emphasizes that there was nothing hidden from the king which he could not explain. That is either a statement about the depth of her inquiry or the magnitude of his insight, or perhaps both. Either way, the encounter was not superficial. It was transformative. When she saw his wisdom, the palace he had built, the order of his court, the structure of his officials, the food at his table, and the sacrifices he offered in the temple of the Lord, the text says there was no more spirit in her. That does not mean she fainted. It means she was overwhelmed, breathless, confronted with something that shattered her expectations. She had heard reports, but what she witnessed exceeded them. And then she declares that not even half had been told to her. That is a powerful admission. It reveals humility in a woman accustomed to authority. It reveals intellectual honesty in someone who came to test and ended up acknowledging superiority and wisdom. But what exactly overwhelmed her? Was it architecture, wealth, organization, or was it coherence between belief and governance? Many ancient kingdoms displayed riches. Many rulers built palaces, but few combined spiritual conviction with administrative excellence in such visible harmony. Solomon's kingdom at that moment represented a fusion of divine reputation and political stability, and perhaps that is what truly struck her. because power without order collapses, wealth without wisdom corrupts, influence without divine alignment fractures. And for a ruler watching the geopolitical landscape carefully, that combination would have been revolutionary. Then she blesses the Lord, the God of Israel, acknowledging that it was He who delighted in Solomon and placed him on the throne. That moment cannot be minimized. A foreign queen publicly recognizing the God of another nation was not merely polite diplomacy. It was ideological acknowledgement. In the ancient world, gods were territorial. Deities were tied to regions and peoples. For her to speak this way suggests she recognized something universal in what she witnessed. She saw beyond tribal boundaries, and that changes the narrative entirely. She did not just admire a king, she recognized a divine source, and yet the biblical account remains brief, suspiciously brief. It does not detail the private conversations. It does not record the emotional tone of their exchanges. It does not state how long she remained in Jerusalem. Silence in Scripture often invites deeper reflection, because sometimes what is not written carries as much weight as what is recorded. Later traditions, especially Ethiopian ones, expand the story dramatically, claiming that she bore a son by Solomon named Menelik, who would carry royal lineage into Africa. Whether one accepts those traditions or not, their existence proves something undeniable. This encounter resonated far beyond a single chapter of ancient text. Why would such a short narrative generate centuries of expansion? Because it contains tension. A powerful queen meeting the wisest king. A seeker confronting revelation. A political alliance layered with spiritual undertones. It is narrative dynamite. And centuries later, Jesus himself references her, saying that the Queen of the South will rise in judgment because she traveled from the ends of the earth to hear Solomon's wisdom, and now something greater than Solomon stood before them. That statement elevates her journey to prophetic significance. She becomes an example of hunger for truth, a rebuke to complacency. But there is an irony woven into this story that is impossible to ignore. Solomon, whose faith and wisdom impressed her so deeply, would later compromise his devotion under the influence of other foreign wives. The king who embodied divine order would eventually fracture spiritually, and this creates a haunting contrast. The foreign queen recognized the glory of Israel's God. The Israelite king later drifted from him. It raises uncomfortable questions. Did she see in Solomon both brilliance and vulnerability? Did she perceive tensions beneath the surface that the text does not describe? Because even at the height of success, seeds of decline can exist unnoticed. When she departed, Solomon gave her all she desired, besides what he gave her out of royal generosity. That phrase is layered with mystery. What did she ask? Trade agreements? Strategic counsel? Religious insight? Administrative knowledge? The text leaves it open, and that openness fuels centuries of speculation. What we know is that she returned to her land changed. You do not travel such distances, confront such revelation, and remain unaffected. The real mystery is not what she saw in Jerusalem. The real mystery is what she did with it when she returned to her throne. Because when a ruler transforms internally, nations feel it. Policies shift, priorities realign, spiritual climates adjust. Even silence can signal change. And if she truly integrated what she encountered in Jerusalem, the ripple effects would have moved through trade networks, alliances, and religious structures. The Bible does not record those details, but the implications are immense. This was not simply a diplomatic visit. It was a convergence of intellect, power, and divine reputation at a precise moment in history. And as we continue to unravel this encounter, the deeper layers begin to surface, layers that suggest this meeting was not an isolated event, but a turning point whose consequences extended far beyond the walls of Solomon's palace and far beyond the sands that carried her caravan back toward the horizon. Back toward the horizon, where the desert swallowed the last visible traces of Jerusalem's towers, and the silence of the dunes became her only companion. But silence does not erase revelation. It amplifies it. Between shifting sands and distant gates, the queen confronted a reality no treasure could overshadow. She encountered something that exceeded power itself. Wealth can impress, architecture can intimidate, organization can inspire. But coherence between wisdom and divine authority leaves a mark that refuses to fade. Upon her return, her court expected reports. Ministers waited for updates, generals for alliances, merchants for trade expansions. But what do you say when what you witnessed cannot be reduced to political advantage? What language do you use when evaluating a king turns into acknowledging a higher authority? She did not return empty-handed. She carried agreements, influence, and strengthened commercial ties. Yet the invisible cargo she brought back weighed more than gold. The encounter with Solomon was not simply about comparing riches. It was about confronting a worldview. Rulers were seen as extensions of gods. Power validated belief. Victory legitimized theology. Solomon's authority was rooted in wisdom attributed to the Lord. This detail is crucial. She saw structure sustained by spiritual conviction. That fusion challenged her religious assumptions. Imagine the internal tension. Her kingdom honored deities of fertility, trade, celestial movements. Rituals reinforced social order, priests mediated divine favor. Yet in Jerusalem, she encountered a temple dedicated to a God who could not be represented by image, who was not confined to territory, and whose covenant extended beyond visible idols. That theological difference is seismic. It is not cosmetic, it is foundational. And when she publicly blessed the God of Israel, she was not making a casual statement. She was acknowledging transcendence. Now consider the broader geopolitical implications. An alliance between Sheba and Israel would have strengthened economic corridors stretching from Africa through Arabia into the Levant. Stability between these powers meant safer trade routes. Safer routes meant increased prosperity. Increased prosperity meant influence. The encounter therefore sits at the intersection of economics and theology. It is impossible to separate the two completely, because in the ancient world, spiritual alignment often reinforced political trust. But history rarely remains static. What makes this story even more compelling is what happens after this peak moment in Solomon's reign. The same king whose disciplined governance and devotion impressed the Queen of Sheba would later multiply alliances through marriages that diluted his spiritual focus. The very wisdom that astonished her would coexist with decisions that fractured unity. This is not a contradiction, it is a warning. Greatness can coexist with vulnerability. Revelation can precede decline, and that tension adds depth to her role in the narrative. She witnessed the summit. She saw the height of order before cracks appeared. Her visit becomes a timestamp of glory. A preserved snapshot of what Israel looked like when wisdom and devotion were aligned. In that sense, she becomes an unexpected guardian of memory. Because through her testimony, recorded in Scripture and echoed centuries later by Jesus, the integrity of that moment is preserved. When Jesus refers to her as the Queen of the South who traveled from the ends of the earth to hear wisdom, he elevates her journey into moral contrast. She becomes an indictment against indifference. She crossed deserts for truth. Others refused to cross the street. She traveled extraordinary distances because she valued wisdom more than comfort. That is not merely historical commentary, it is spiritual challenge. And here is where the story shifts from ancient chronicle to personal confrontation. The Queen of Sheba did not rely solely on reports. She did not accept second-hand descriptions. She investigated, she questioned, she verified. In an age saturated with information, how often do we do the same? How often do we hear about truth without pursuing it deeply? Her journey was not convenient. It required resources, time, exposure to danger, and the humility to admit that what she had heard might not match what she would find. But she went anyway. That decision defines her legacy more than any speculation about romance or lineage. Whether or not later traditions about descendants are historically verifiable, they reflect something profound. Cultures recognized that her visit symbolized connection, a bridge between continents, a meeting point between Africa and Israel, a convergence of trade and theology. Even if the expansions of legend stretch beyond documented fact, the enduring fascination proves that her presence mattered. And perhaps the most intriguing aspect of the narrative remains what Scripture does not elaborate. It does not describe her doubts before departure. It does not detail the private exchange of counsel. It does not record the emotional aftermath of returning home. The silence leaves space for reflection, and in that space the story becomes timeless. Because at its core, this is not merely about a queen and a king. It is about the pursuit of wisdom wherever it is found. It is about recognizing truth even when it challenges your established system. It is about humility in the presence of something greater than your own authority. And it is about the responsibility that follows revelation. What did she change in her kingdom? Did she reform rituals? Did she adjust diplomatic priorities? Did she integrate new principles into governance? We do not have explicit answers, but we know that transformative encounters rarely leave structures untouched. Even subtle shifts in perspective can redirect the course of a nation over time. The Queen of Sheba stands in Scripture as a paradox, briefly mentioned yet endlessly discussed, foreign yet spiritually perceptive, powerful yet willing to question. And in that paradox lies her enduring relevance. She represents the leader who seeks beyond ego, the ruler who does not fear evaluation, the mind that travels beyond borders in search of understanding. And there is another layer that demands attention. Solomon gave her everything she desired, beyond what he granted out of generosity. That implies exchange, dialogue, reciprocity. This was not one-sided admiration. It was engagement between equals in influence, even if not equal in the specific gift of wisdom at that time. Her presence validated his reputation internationally. His responses validated her discernment. Each strengthened the other's standing. Yet only one of them is later cited by Jesus as an example of faith-driven pursuit. That detail cannot be ignored. It suggests that her hunger distinguished her. She did not passively inherit revelation. She pursued it. So now the question turns toward us. If a queen could cross vast deserts for wisdom, what prevents us from pursuing it with equal intensity? If someone with wealth, security, and influence still felt compelled to seek deeper understanding, what excuse remains for complacency? Her story confronts comfort. It confronts assumption. It confronts superficial engagement with truth. And perhaps that is why her narrative endures, because it is unfinished in a way that invites participation. The Bible records her arrival and departure, but it leaves the transformation open-ended. That openness mirrors our own journeys. We encounter truth, we respond, we return to our lives, and what we do afterward defines whether the journey mattered. The Queen of Sheba's legacy is not confined to gold or spices. It is anchored in the courage to verify, the humility to acknowledge greatness, and the discernment to recognize divine source beyond national identity. She saw that wisdom was not self-generated in Solomon. It flowed from the Lord. And in recognizing that, she transcended political calculation. If this story has challenged the way you view power, faith, or the pursuit of truth, I want you to engage with it. Write in the comments what surprised you most. Was it her boldness in testing Solomon? The geopolitical weight of her visit? The spiritual depth of her acknowledgement? Or the irony that she recognized divine wisdom while Solomon later drifted from it? Share this with someone who thinks ancient stories are irrelevant, because this narrative proves otherwise. It shows that leadership, humility, and spiritual hunger are timeless forces that shape history. And if you want to continue exploring biblical encounters that hide layers most people overlook, make sure you subscribe and stay connected. There are more stories like this waiting to be uncovered, stories that challenge assumptions and reveal dimensions you may have never considered.